Hello and welcome along to episode number 1 of TGP Has a Podcast. You are joined this week by myself, Mike Noon, and we have Dom Smith and Phil Bardwell joining us as guests. Hello, gents.
Hello, Mike.
Hello.
And for this first episode of this podcast, which I will come on to explain very shortly, we're going to be talking about the successes of TGP DiRT. Now, what we want to talk about over the next few weeks is we're going to bring back some old stories, some fan favourites of the past 9 years of TGP now, and maybe some controversial moments, some fan favourites that we've looked back on and thought that was a classic TGP moment, and also some exciting things to come up in the series as well. So, as said, our first topic for this week is going to be TGP DiRT and the unlikely fan favourite that it's become over what is now the 3 previous seasons we've run, coming into the 4th series. So we're going to first talk about what our first thoughts are when we think about TGP DiRT as a whole, and maybe some memorable moments we have. So, Dom, if I was to ask you perhaps what's the first thing you think of when you think of TGP DiRT, what's the first thing that springs to mind?
I think it's just sort of the unpredictable, really. It's so anything can happen in a rally. You can be a little too quick around one corner, you can put a foot out of place, go a bit wide, and suddenly you've got a puncher. It's not like F1 where you can sort of make mistakes and get away with it. It's not really like that in rally, and I think that's why you can have maybe the lower down guys that normally aren't doing as well in other leagues able to do well in this league. And I think it's just really the unpredictability, I think, that makes everyone have a sort of an even chance to win in it.
Certainly, I agree with you there. It's definitely the bringing out of everyone that comes to mind when you think of this series. And Phil, if I was to say to you, TGP DiRT, what's the first thing you think of?
Dom Smith and £5. No, I'm only joking. Along the lines of what Dom said, it is like the unpredictability. I mean, we go back to our first foray into it in season 1, and I'm pretty sure Monte Carlo was the first rally. You know, we were kind of in unfamiliar territory because we've done like leagues in like F1 and stuff, so it was a bit unfamiliar territory. All having to go at it, and I remember during Monte Carlo, one of the Monte Carlo stages, there was a corner which just caught a lot of people out. I came around it as soon as you went off the cliff. It just ended your rally. That was it, and I think it caught about 3 or 4 people out on the same corner. But that's the whole. Like, I think that's what makes it exciting. You can't make a mistake here.
No,
because it will either end your rally or put you in serious jeopardy. But then again, you cannot give up either. Sometimes you might have hit a tree or hit a barrier, but someone else might hit it worse to get a puncture, and you actually beat them despite having a bad rally yourself. So it's unpredictability, but it's definitely it's great fun.
Oh, yeah, I certainly see what you mean. You can. If you have an awful first stage and you have a spin, or for example, or you end up, going the wrong way on a junction, which I'm sure we've all done, you can come back from it in 2 or 3 stages time and suddenly find yourself back in the running again. Just because someone else might make a similar mistake, or if you're able to do a stage slightly better. And I think you're both right there. It's just that you really don't know how it's going to end up. And I mean, if we look back on the sort of past seasons of TGP DiRT, I mean, my first thought when I think of it is, funnily enough, also in Rally Monte Carlo, and my rally ending in the first stage after about 4 corners, and that was a DNF then, and that was a rally I thought I could have done quite well in. So it really, really does have an impact on how everything goes, and you've got to be, for that whole 20-30 minutes that you're going to be on the stages for, you've got to be focused. I think that's why that we've all sort of flooded back to it when we brought back the TGP DiRT series for its 4th season, and I certainly think that's why we've had such a good turnout for it. We'll come on to season 4 in a second. Just going to take a couple of minutes to look back on the seasons that we've had go past, and if we look back at them, the early seasons were certainly dominated by one man in particular, with Chris Thurgood. Even in the season so far that he hasn't won the title, he finished in the top 2, taking 8 rally victories on his way. But, I suppose when you look back at Chris and those first couple of seasons, what was it that made him so quick?
Well, I think at that time, when people just click with something straight away. I think that's kind of what happened to him. It's like we went on it. It was our first foray into it, and he just picked it up quickest.
Yeah.
So
because he only won that
stage.
first title by 1 point, if my memory served me right, from Wingsman, who who only has one rally victory less than him. But was it the case that maybe it was, only 2 or 3 of them, as you just said there, Phil, that sort of was able to pick it up quickest, and the rest of us were just playing catch up?
Sometimes it just works like that, and I think that's what happened, especially in the early stages, especially the first 2 seasons, I should say.
Yes. Yeah.
I think also Wingsman and Chris were both pushing each other along. I think those two, there was 1 point between them in the first season. I think it was 4 points in the second season. Wingsman then finally doing it in the third season. But I think those two were always sort of like pushing one another to go quicker. So, pressure from each other, and then those two pushing each other forwards made the gap a little bigger for the guys behind. But I mean, even in season 1, I think Alex was third, and he was only, I think, 10 points back from Chris Thurgood.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point. Yeah,
it was close competition.
It's certainly a what's the word I'm looking for? A series, a championship, which does favour those who maybe are able to switch it on quicker. Especially coming from rally to rally, different terrains, different. Could be completely. Can go from snow to gravel. One rally to another. So to be able to turn it on every single rally in different conditions, different scenarios, different cars as well, which we haven't mentioned. That takes a supreme amount of skill as well as consistency, doesn't it?
Oh yes, and probably a little bit of practice as well. Because if I go from my own personal experience during season 3, when me and Dom had said bet, it was only about I think after the first 2 rallies, I practiced a bit more, and then it started working for me. I was like, this is how it works. You're just building up momentum, and then you see yourself just getting better and better at it as you're learning more and more. So it absolutely helps picking up quick and just clicking with it straight away. But you can, over time, just get used to it and find out your own way of how to work it, even car by car.
Yeah, certainly, and the different classes that we cover as well, being able to transition from one to another, it can be a bit of a big jump.
Yeah, I think the cars are also different as well. Yeah, the R5s, I think this season we're using, for example, we had the Group A's, which are completely a different era of rally. I think 20 years, 30 years prior to the cars that were racing in the R5s. You've got the NR4s, R4s. I'm not quite sure what road type that is, Phil. Is that meant to be like a more modern kind of approach to rallying? Do you know?
I believe they are modern. I think they're like North American rally cars. That's what they use.
Okay, so there's a good mix of cars then in the season, and yeah, as you said, we've had this always since season 1. And I think Chris and Wingsman just sort of suited them, whereas others were sort of getting used to the cars. Chris and Wingsman could get used to it very quickly and could switch over from rally to rally.
I think it keeps it interesting as well, having different cars at different rallies. Because, as you say, different rallies suit different people, but then different cars also suit different people as well. So no results are going to be the same unless people have picked it up quickly. But generally, you look through and some people have a rubbish rally one week and then a fantastic rally the next, and it could be car or track rally dependent even.
And does that maybe why a championship like this reward the more consistent driver? Is that why we think that we maybe have seen less people winning rallies, but those who have winning more of them?
I think that's definitely right with rally. I mean, I think if you look at seasons 1 and 2, drivers that were sort of in the top half of the table, I think myself included, there was Joe, Chris Johnson, drivers that aren't normally performing that well in other leagues. So F1, for example, will be towards the back end of the grid. But in rally, we know sort of if you're consistent, you'll be rewarded for it. It's not a case of just going around lap after lap, setting reasonable times. It's about, just keeping it on the road, not making mistakes, not getting punches, looking after the car, thinking about how you're going to use your rebuild between stages. So if you just keep that consistent pace, you'll pick up places from it. You can be patient and you can sort of move up the table. And that's where I think people like me, Joe, Chris, have been able to sort of benefit from that, and that's allowed us to finish sort of top half of the table and take podiums when the big drivers make mistakes.
So looking into season 4 then, our biggest turnout ever for a TGP Series league, I think, let alone for just TGP Dirt. We've got some big names in there this year. We've got one returning champion. We've got some heavy duty new players. Definitely looking at it, the ones to look out for, as we'll touch on when we go on the rally recaps as well in just a moment from the first 2 rounds. The big hitters will be wanting to make a solid start to the season, because that is how you assert your dominance and you get yourself in a comfortable position. But I mean, the drivers we've got to look out for and are surely got to be the likes of Softy, Roy, Jean as well. He can pull up over. Obviously, returning champion Chris. Obviously, both you two. But is there anyone else who could sort of join that mix for, hunting for wins and certainly, maybe a top 3 finish in the championship?
So I think we've got Luca. He was with us in the first 3 seasons. He was sort of not the quickest driver, but for whatever reason, this new Dirt Rally 2 game has suited him more. He's promised to do a lot better this time, and he threatened to do so in, I think, the first rally. I won't go too much into the first 2 rallies for now, but I think Luca's going to be one guy to sort of upset the front runners, if you will. I think we've also got Dan, former TGP1 champion. 4 times he's won that now. He's now trying out rally for the first time, and it's a very good start for not playing a rally game in probably about 10 years. So as you get used to the games, you will become quicker and quicker, and Dan, I think, will do that. So I think there's Dan, there's Luca, there's Coet. There's so many drivers that can win rallies this season, and that's why it's so good. We've got Zach, he's new as well. I think he's currently doing quite well in the championship. He's going to be threatening for wins. And then, of course, the obvious ones like Softy and Roy, and there's just so many numbers of drivers that can take wins, I think.
And I suppose, with the introduction as well that we've got of TGP Dirt 2, keeping it interesting for those lower down the field. We've got the likes of Jacko and Bazza and others involved in that for a little sort of sub-championship for them. But there's certainly drivers that could, if some of those big guys make a mistake, find themselves in the top 10 of even the whole TGP Dirt event, couldn't they?
And yeah, like the top guys can ruin their rally or even DNF their rally. And now all of a sudden we've got these guys who are fighting their own championship, potentially fighting for a top 10. And that would even motivate them further, because I've got a top 10 coming here. So it makes it for a really exciting championship.
Well, certainly, because they've got to try and compete as much as they can to get points in the main series as well as their own, and that's what they've ultimately their goal is to try and take the Dirt 2 title, but certainly is try and cause an upset in the main series as well. If they can take a few points off the big guns, then they're not going to shy away from that.
No, definitely not.
As we sort of briefly touched on, we have had a very interesting championship so far. So we'll go over the first couple rounds we've had in relative detail, and what happened in the stages and the end results we had on those. So we started off around number 1 in Rally Poland. Now, coming into this, there were certainly people that we knew should be able to do quite well and get a good result. Dom touched on it briefly there. Luca was certainly threatening. The favourite for the rally was still definitely Softy. But we still had the likes of Roy and Dan, as you rightfully mentioned there, who could have caused a bit of an upset. So then coming into stage 1 that we had, the performance that certainly stood out was of course Softy's. He was miles ahead after just 1 stage.
Yeah, I think we knew Softy was going to be quick. I don't think we thought he was going to be that quick. He's sort of, Poland's a rally he does well anyway, and he said at the start of the season, this is the one I'm going to win. He knew he was going to do well here. So to win by 2 minutes, though, almost, I think was a bit of a scary thought to the rest of the fields. And, I mean, what a drive from him. He didn't put a foot wrong all rally. I think there was a mistake on stage 2, cost him about maybe 3 or 4 seconds, but he could afford to do that. He was so far ahead of the rest of the field. I think it's just something about that rally that seems to suit his style. He's quick there. It's not always going to be like that for Softy. He said that himself as well. Poland suits his style. The rest won't, necessarily. But yes, Softy to be almost 2 minutes clear of Roy in the end. Roy had a good rally himself too, and to only be second and that far behind Softy, I think would have been a shock to him. But then future rallies, he knows he's going to get closer, and he knows there will be chances for him to close up on that. But then if you look further down the field, I think there was myself and Phil, third and fourth that rally. There was Johners, there was Joe, Owen, Zach, the likes of those guys, all really close. So if Softy or Roy do necessarily make a mistake, any number of drivers could sort of take that victory. So it's really close. Just need Softy to make a few more mistakes, I think, to let the rest of the field in.
Yeah, certainly.
I think Softy wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I think Softy was an alien at Poland. He was just that quick. I mean, it might get a bit closer as we go throughout the season, as people probably get used to the game, and hopefully, or maybe not in his case, but Softy makes a few more mistakes as he starts feeling the pressure. But there was also like Luca, who crashed out on the final stage. He was looking good for a potential podium. There are others who don't feature in the top 10 who had a bit of a bad rally. So fingers crossed, it'll all come close as we head into the season.
Definitely. Well, I mean, we just have to look at the stage one. Softy was nearly 40 seconds quicker than the second man. That's an unreal time difference. When you then look there, the gap between second and third was just under 3 seconds. So to then be nearly 40 seconds ahead of then that difference is just ridiculous. He everyone says you want to hit the ground running in a season, but in round one, but just in stage one alone, that's an unholy amount of time to be ahead of your nearest rival.
I think in boxing that's called like not quite a knockout, but maybe like 2 knockdowns in round one.
It's very close to it. It's very, and you're right. You just have to look through the stages. So as we mentioned, there's stage one. Softy absolutely run away with, and then we had Dan and Roy coming out in second place. Now, those two, I think there could be quite a season-long battle between them. They're certainly looking good for a second place charge, maybe the former rather than latter of Roy. You had obviously Chris, who was quite in the running, Dom and Phil as well. Owen, who we know has run a few rallies before, he can certainly challenge. So you're looking at that little pack and thinking you could have a very interesting little collection here. But then you look at the likes of former people who have had success in DiRT and in other series like Alex and Koa, who were struggling. And was that just a case of not adapting to the rally cars as well? Do we reckon?
Well, I think the game's slightly different as well. You'd think, it's a similar game to the first game, but there is like slight differences in like the handling model and stuff like that. Of course, we haven't most of us haven't touched a rally game maybe since perhaps the last league we did. So it's been a long time. So you get getting back into the groove of it might take a bit of time to do for some people.
Yeah, certainly. So stage 2 comes around, and shorter stage, this one, and Softy isn't knocked off his pedestal, but he's knocked off the top of stage winner, at least, as we mentioned before. Luca suddenly comes in and puts an appearance at top of the stage. So suddenly, yes, it's a shorter stage, but we've got competition all of a sudden, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, Softy, that first stage, I don't think he's ever going to set a stage like that again. I don't think since then he's gone anywhere near that sort of margin of victory on a stage, sorry. Luca had a really good stage too. I think a lot of drivers have just made mistakes in the opening round. I think we saw it in the stages 3 and 4. Roy sort of came back, I think, as well. But Softy he's definitely going to have more competition. And stage 2, I think, showed that is possible. Luca, I think, was quickest. I'm not sure Softy was second on that stage. Maybe he was a little further down. But yeah, there are drivers that can beat Softy in a stage. It's just about trying to put it all together and do it over 6 stages to win a rally, I think.
Was stage 2 the stage where he had the hairbill chicane? He made the mistake.
It was, yes. Now, I was going to come on to that, as we had a few drivers actually struggle with that hay bale chicane, Softy being one of them, Dan being another one from memory. So that's a trait that's synonymous with Poland, having the hay bale chicanes. But does that show that maybe there's a weakness in Softy's rallying?
I think if you're going that quick, you're going to make potentially more bigger mistakes. I think Softy was pushing too hard at that particular point, hits the hay bale, gets it all wrong into that corner, and yeah, I think that's obviously the risk of going that little bit alien pace quickness. I think he's just a little too quick for that corner, and unfortunately for him, it didn't quite work out. He didn't lose too much time, was able to keep the lead he had, but yeah, you're going to make more mistakes if you're pushing that hard.
Well, yeah, I mean, we say he managed to keep his lead. Did he ever? I mean, the gap only came, it actually still increased because Dan, who was second in the first stage, lost time on him. Roy was the only person who, from the top 3 in stage 1, who was able to keep, was able to go faster than him. So the gap's already now up to 41 seconds. So he's nearly got 3/4 of a minute after the 2 stages, and I want to draw now on to our 2-time champion, Chris Thurgood, having an awful time of things in his mind, I'm sure. Not really finding that balance, and already a minute off after 2 stages. A 2-time champion. Now, Phil, you mentioned that the game's different, but surely it's not that different.
It's not a whole lot different, but there are certain aspects, like sometimes it doesn't take a lot to change in some people to make a massive change. The tiniest little difference can make a huge like benefit or deficit. So he might be suffering that. Also, he has had a child, so he might have a baby brain coming on. Yes, he's lost the edge at the moment. It'll be interesting to see if he makes a comeback as we get through the season, as he maybe adapts to the game and gets the muscle memory back, I suppose.
Yeah, I certainly think that could be down to it. So have a service break, chance for drivers to get their cars repaired, get their mind back in order. Stages 3 and 4 roll around. Not a huge amount of dramas to report from. Softy still going very fast. Everyone just about keeping into pace. But I suppose when the real drama of the rally happened was actually in the final couple of stages. So it was pretty clear by the time that we got to stage 5 that Softy was going to be coming away with the victory here. But the battle for second really started hotting up, actually, with the likes of Roy, Dom, Phil, Owen, Luca, all being in the running for it. And was stage 5 where we start to see more mistakes coming in from the drivers? I mean, Roy had almost a minute lead over Chiapelli at this point, but that doesn't guarantee everything. So, of those drivers, did we start to see more mistakes coming in as the pressure got to them?
I think at this point, Softy and Roy were sort of quite safe in their positions, so they necessarily didn't need to make those risks. So they sort of, I think, didn't take it down too much, but they were able to sort of, maybe take it a little easier through the dangerous parts of the stages. Whereas myself, Luca, Phil, we were pushing a little harder because we knew there was a podium in it. We knew whoever was quickest over the last 2 or so 3 stages was going to take a possible podium result, which is a fantastic way to start the season. So we still had to push. And yeah, I think Luca was pushing hardest of us all. And I think ultimately that went against him on the final stage. He crashed out looking for the podium place, and he was, I think, 5-6 seconds ahead of me at the time for the podium. So he didn't need to take it that risky, but he chose to, and it unfortunately backfired for him. I was pushing it. I was taking it a little more cautiously, which in the end worked out for me to take the position from Luca. And I think Phil, he was taking it a little cautiously too, I believe.
Well, yeah. I mean, if going back to what Mike's saying about people starting to make mistakes, it started happening for Owen in stages 3 and 4, I believe. He had like 2 massive rolls in both them stages, which didn't help his cause. And I believe Roy made a mistake in, I think, the last stage, which almost ended his rally. He was still pushing, and he made a massive barrel roll mistake into a tree. As for myself, yeah, stage 5, I'd hit a tree, and unbeknownst to myself, I knocked the headlight out. So at the start of stage 6, I was going through, I was like, I can't see a thing. So I had to take it cautious just to get it home. and I think Dom benefited from that by, well, he had an amazing last sector. I think it was like one of the quickest last sectors in the final stage, and the benefit of actually being able to see. And Luca pushing too hard, pushing as hard as he could. He didn't back off one moment, trying to take little shortcuts as you can do in rally, and took one too many with some logs waiting for his car.
Yeah, so, I mean, coming into stage number 5, after all that action that happened, after stage 5, after all that action that happened, and we're then looking forward to the last stage. So, Softy, clear lead, Roy in a comfortable second, and as you mentioned, then the battle for third, there was 10 seconds covering 3 drivers. Luca was in the hot seat, then it was Dom, and then it was Phil. Did Luca need to push that much? Could he have just played a little bit more safe? Or when you start playing it safe, you then draw yourself to being a little bit too cautious and you end up losing even more time? So did he have to push just to keep his mind in the right position?
I think one thing with rallying too is you don't necessarily know what your opponent's going to do. Obviously, you're running at different times. You're not all on the same track at the same time. So for all Luca knows, I could set a blister in stage and he's gonna lose it if he's too cautious. But at the same time, he did have a big margin over myself. I don't think he needed to push as hard as he did, but I think being the racer inside him, he was like, I've got to go for this. A real chance to show what I can do here. I may not have got a first or a second, but I can show Softy and Roy that I am going to be here sort of over the course of the season. But unfortunately, in rally, if you make mistakes like that, it's going to cost you, and to lose out on... He didn't score any points in the end from Poland, so suddenly, rather than being just, I think, 9 points back from Softy, he would have been if he'd finished third. Instead, he's 30 points back, and already that's a potentially title moment over for him. So,
wow.
Whether he needed to push it that hard or not, I don't know. But yeah, it definitely cost him.
Well, you mention it, and you're right. I mean, is then that you're sort of thinking to yourself, well, that's definitely the title hunt over now. Scoring 0 points in a rally. Because what are the likelihood of those around me doing that as well? I can only assume it's quite slim.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, how do you know if you're going to take it easy, how do you know how much to back off? I don't think there's a way you can do it. You've got to have some commitment in rallying. And as Dom said, we don't know who set what times because we're all at different times. So Luca's probably at the starting gate thinking, I've got to push. I know the gap's, 10 seconds, but still, you can make 10 seconds up on the stage. So in his mindset, he'd already made the choice. I think I've got to push as hard as I can, thinking Dom and myself have set a very good stage.
Yeah, well, the rally ended, as it does. In the end, with obviously Softy taking the victory, Roy coming home in second, and Dom running out the podium. Phil and John then 4th and 5th. And if you look then down the rest of sort of the top 10, you had Owen, who we mentioned obviously with a couple of rally wins. Dan, who started so well, just inside the top 10. Zach, who certainly looking quite quick, slipping into the top 10 as well. Former third place finisher in a season, Alex Coates, outside the top 10. But another big hitter who didn't score any points, also having a retirement, of course, was Chris Thurgood, our 2-time champion. Suddenly not scoring a point at all.
I don't think Chris had one DNF in the first 3 seasons.
No.
And suddenly, the first round of season 4, he's out of the rally, no points. So I think that was probably more of a shock to him than it was to anyone else. But yeah, Chris is already a long way back after the first race, so a lot of catching up for him to do.
So we've got 2 drivers, in essence, then out of position in the championship, and surely going to be trying to turn this round as soon as they can, coming into rally number 2 in Australia, haven't we? Then this should make Australia even more interesting, no?
Absolutely, yeah. And and with it just been rallying, expect the unexpected, the unpredictable can happen. So they might, it depends how they approach it. They might just go all guns blazing and hope for the best, but I can make another mistake. People pushing for their own positions, their own personal pride, it's going to be unpredictable, which just makes it even more so, like, more to watch and more enjoyable, more fun.
Definitely. So in TGP Dirt 2 then, the top 3 after round number 1 was Chris Johnson, who was the leader. Then we had Jacko and Dan rounding out the top 3. So definitely going to be interesting to see how that develops over the season. I think we've got some drivers who are certainly going to be eager to improve as quickly as they can as the season goes on as well. So definitely an interesting fight to look out for there. But as we move then on to rally number 2 and we head to Australia, we've got Softy suddenly then with, I think, actually even more to prove after such a dominant first rally. Can he keep the consistency going? We've got drivers like Roy, Dan, Dom, Phil, Owen wanting to keep momentum up. And then we've got Chris and Luca looking to just try and get their season started. So we had a really exciting recipe for the second rally, didn't we?
Yeah, as you mentioned, lots of drivers looking to respond against Softy. They knew they had to do something. There's still a long way to go in the championship, but you need to start getting that time back. Softy had such a deficit margin in the first rally. So Roy was looking to improve, and Roy, an event I think Australia is favourable to him. Other drivers too, as you said, Luca and Chris, who didn't score, looking to respond, Aiden as well. But yeah, the recipe was definitely there for a good rally in Australia.
Definitely. Well, stage 1 came and went. Again, another long stage to start off with. And again, another dominant performance for Softy. 20 seconds clear of his nearest challenger. And suddenly you're thinking, well, could this be a dominant showcasing season in TGP Dirt? Could we, who can stop him?
I think what helped in that, for North Stage 1, I actually had a decent Stage 1, except I made one mistake, which, albeit, probably only cost me about 5 or 6 seconds, so Softy would have still beat me anyway, but the gap would have been a bit closer. But Softy just made no mistakes, and he is blisteringly quick still. I think there's no denying that. As you said, he's probably got a point to prove. So I think people will catch him. It's just at the moment he's got the upper hand. He's done the uppercut, and we're all dazed.
Well, it's certainly a hammer blow to be dealt with straight away. The battle for second was intriguing. 10 seconds covered the next 4 cars from Phil, Roy, Dan and Dom. Luca and Zach actually just a further 10 seconds behind that, with Alex creeping in as well. But a disastrous opening stage for Chris again, who was already a minute behind.
Again, feeling the pressure. Did he pick up a puncture in that? I can't remember. Or did he just make a massive mistake?
I think it was just a mistake, I believe.
It's again another big blow for Chris, who hasn't really been able to get his season started yet. So to have another difficult stage straight off the bat, when he would have wanted to have maybe cemented a solid performance in, just to maybe get some confidence back, suddenly taking some pain from it already.
I believe I'm going to throw another driver in there. I don't think he's been mentioned yet. John, as he had a surprisingly good rally in Poland, finishing 5th, and I think he put pressure on himself for the start of Australia, because I believe he had a bad Stage 1. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
I think it wasn't the best ever. Yes, he was quite far behind. I think he was already a minute behind or close to that.
So maybe again it was just maybe the pressure for Chris as well as John. As John has put pressure on himself by thinking he had a decent rally 1. He wanted to prove himself again. And Chris, for a completely different reason, to try and get back to the front, and they've both succumbed to the pressure in the first stage.
Definitely agree with you there. Well, so stage 2 came round, a sprint stage, and just like in Rally Poland, stage 2, we had a different stage winner. We had Roy being quickest by 3 seconds from Dan. Softy only posting the 3rd fastest time of the stage. His lead being cut to less than 20 seconds. Well, it's on now, isn't it? Surely we're gonna have a fight for the win, aren't we?
So this is where it started to get, I think, a little more interesting. Roy admitted on the first stage he went into it too cautiously. He was sort of backing off where he didn't need to. He'd hit like a left 5 and then lift, but he didn't need to. He could have gone flat out. That was just him sort of. I think he was doing it quite late at night, so he was pretty tired. But after that, he said, right, I'll do the next stages tomorrow when I'm more awake. And straight away, stage 2, he goes quickest. So I think this was a rally that really did suit him. But unfortunately for him, having such a cautious stage 1 was already a massive downside to him. But yeah, from stage 2 onwards, I think he doesn't actually lose that much time to Softy over the course of the rally. So yeah, Roy suddenly right into it. Whether he could catch him or not over the next 4 stages, it was down to see.
I think by this point, we might have found Softy's Achilles heel, which is short stages. People, and I think maybe Softy might feel the pressure because he knows it's a short stage. He has to push to try and maintain the lead because people can push and get a good time, and if he doesn't, he can be slower than a few people, as in this case. So maybe short rallies are Softy's Achilles heel at the moment.
Well, it's clear to see why that could be, and let's hope for the remainder of the year that proves to be the case, and we have some opportunities for other drivers to take stage wins. Now, service point, we had time for drivers to reflect, get their cars back in order, and then we move on to stage 3, another relatively short stage. But again, Softy coming out quickest, but this time only just over 3 seconds quicker than Roy. But we had 2 drivers in this stage have absolute shockers. Chiapelli lost almost a minute, and Dan losing a minute and a half. That's 2 key players for the podium out of the running straight away. It opens the door for someone like Zach, who had a very good stage, actually, only 15 seconds off the quickest. I think he was 3rd in that stage, to suddenly pull himself into the hunt for a podium.
Yes, and I believe there was also one other name that had a bit of a bad stage 3. I don't think you mentioned it, Mike, but I think was it you, Phil? I think you had a bad stage 3 too, I believe.
Can we not talk about it?
This was the puncture, wasn't it? And crawling around the stage from memory. Was that right?
Oh,
yeah, and in rally, you sort of if you have some sort of knowledge in rally, and always pack a spare tire, in case you get the puncture. But Phil, whether it was a dumb moment or something, but Phil didn't pack a spare tire. So not only did he get a puncture on stage 3, and then he had to do all of stage 4 with that puncher. And Phil, I don't think you'll be making that mistake again, I believe, in future.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. So Phil, a 50-second deficit led on that stage then. So at this point, we're over a minute behind the leader. Just after stage 3, so this is even after stage 4, where you had to do the whole stage with a puncture. What goes through your mind as a driver at that point when the realization hits that this is a difficult couple of stages now?
Well, after stage 3, I mean, the end of stage 3 was terrible because come around the final corner, the car turned the opposite way, so I was facing the wrong way. I tried to reverse across the line, the car then turned back and hit a tree, and I couldn't get it facing the right way to cross the line. It took me about 15 seconds to cross the line from the final corner. It was that much of a mess. At this point, I was like, I've got another stage to do. And I'm like, is the punch repaired? No, it wasn't. When I seen the car, I was like, oh, God, just get it over and done with. As soon as the lights went off, 3, 2, 1, go, the car pulled immediately left. I was like, this is going to be a long stage. Even though it was a short stage, this is just a long one. But despite how terrible things look, with points being down to 20th, and as we saw in Poland, we didn't mention it, there was 10 DNFs in Poland. So you can still, it's worth dragging a 3-wheel car through a stage, and yes, you might have a rubbish rally, but you might still get rewarded for points. And
well, this is the thing. It can change very quickly, and I mean, although Phil in stage 4, you were double the time that Softy was in that stage, which completely ruined your chances of being able to get a podium for a simple mistake of not packing a spare tire. I mean, just unbelievable when you think about it, not packing a spare tire. But those who did have a good stage 4 were starting to see some rewards coming from. So Luca found himself in the top 3. Softy was quickest again, but only by 5 seconds this time from Roy. Dom and Zach had relatively tricky rallies, stages. Chris had quite a decent stage, so that put him back in the running for a podium. So suddenly we're starting to see not a momentum shift, but certainly when one person does have a particularly bad stage and it does put them all the way down, if a couple of people have some relatively tidy stages, they can pull themselves right back into contention.
So that second leg, stages 3 and 4, were treacherous conditions. It was the first time we'd seen rain all rally, and the gravel roads in Australia are pretty unique. So a mix of sort of the gravel roads and the rain, as we saw in stage 3 alone, we saw Dan, Luca, Phil all hit trouble. Stage 4 wasn't raining then, but the roads were still wet. So I think myself included, I think Zach too, took it a little more cautiously, knowing that, punches had been seen on stage 3. Let's not do what those guys did and take it a bit easier. Whereas Chris and Luca, they had a bit more confidence through that stage, and as I said, put themselves right back into the picture, especially with Phil and Dan dropping down so much. Suddenly there's 5 or 6 guys who are looking for the podium place.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that, and then leading then on to stage number 5, we had Roy taking another stage win, 2 seconds quicker than Softy, so that brought that gap down under 25 seconds. So that really put the pressure on for the last stage, and that stage was a relatively long one as well. It certainly wasn't a sprint. Chiapelli had a very good stage as well. Over 10 seconds quicker than Zach and 15 seconds quicker than Dom. So he suddenly finds himself just 20 seconds behind a podium place suddenly. Chris struggled a little bit more. So that battle for third is changing as relatively quickly as well. But suddenly, heading into the last stage, we almost have a battle for the rally win, don't we?
So I think on the between stages 2 and 5, Roy and Softy, Roy actually only lost, I think, half a second over those 4 stages to Softy, which proved, again, just how damaging the first stage was for Roy. Without that, suddenly there's 5/10 between them going into the last stage. Unfortunately for Roy, it was a bigger margin than that. But yeah, as you said, going into the last stage, Roy still had a chance. Softy still could have made a mistake, gone a bit wide somewhere, gone off the road, and Roy would have been there to capitalise. But yeah, Roy was right back into it, I believe. Unfortunately, Softy responded, I think, and set a really good time in stage 6 and actually extended his gap over Roy to win the rally. But yeah, there was a real threat that Softy could have lost that rally in the last stage, and it's just a shame that stage 1 was so poor for Roy earlier in the rally.
So Phil, had we not seen Roy had such a difficult stage 1, admittedly he in the last stage again it was a little bit more of a sprint. He must have made a mistake or something because it was nearly a quarter of a minute behind Softy. But maybe perhaps without these issues, could we have seen a genuine battle for the rally win? I mean, you can say the same about Softy. If he hadn't made mistakes, it would have been even closer. But would we have seen, with a smaller gap, maybe Softy struggle with the pressure?
Potentially, yes. I mean, even now, Softy now knows that Roy is capable of matching, even beating him. So I think the pressure's already starting to build, even just from that. So unfortunately for us, we might have to wait till the next rally to see it. But definitely, I think it's game on now. Roy is definitely going to up his game, and Softy is going to start feeling the pressure from Roy. Maybe others as well will start joining him, but at the moment, Roy is the man at the moment to take it to Softy.
Well, definitely. And we had an interesting climax to the battle for the podium as well, which did end up with Dom taking the podium place by just 6 seconds ahead of Zach. Zach with a fantastic performance in Rally Australia. New Zealand being a relatively similar rally to Australia. Maybe the gravel a little bit looser there. But can we see him pull himself into contention for a podium as the season goes on, maybe?
As I see it for New Zealand, yes. I think he's definitely a podium contender. What do you think, Dom?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Zach has had a brilliant first round in his first race. Suddenly in round 2, he's up to 4th, missing out on the podium by, I think, 5 or 6 seconds. He was right in there all of a sudden. And yeah, he's finding his feet very quickly, and he's, still only a second rally. He's going to get quicker. And yeah, I think a real podium threat going forward, and maybe in the future, race wins too.
Yeah, definitely. So it was another rally to forget for Owen, who only just scraped into the top 10. Dan the Man was able to pull it back to a certain degree and wind up 8th. Chris finally registering some points on the board in P7. And we even had Alex Coates with a decent result, just missing out on the top 5. Luca, without his early mistakes, though, he was quick in those rallies that he managed to avoid making some big errors in, and actually still pulled it back to a top 5 finish, and only just over 10 seconds off of Zach. So Luca, we certainly can't count him out for a top 3 place in the standings. You know, even after that disastrous first rally he had, from being maybe a little bit overcommitted, shall we say?
Well, yeah, in Poland, Lucas should have got third. I think we can all agree on that. And then probably the same in Australia. He was looking good for third, but I think he got a 30-second penalty for going wide at a corner, and in the end he lost out to third by what you say, 20 seconds?
It was about 40 seconds in the end.
Again.
So, you know, it's small margins.
Yeah.
So that had Australia then. So we've got 4 more rallies to come then. Again, various different cars, various different challenges that the drivers are going to face. So next up we've got New Zealand, which we've already mentioned, a little bit looser gravel. We've got the modern rally cars as well. So 2 completely different challenges that the drivers will be facing there. Are we going to see Softy toppled?
I think New Zealand is a rally that Softy genuinely likes as well. I think it's what they were polling for him. So it's going to be another one you'd expect him to do well at. But again, faster cars, which means a bigger risk of impact. And if it is an impact, it might be a DNF as opposed to a puncher. But again, Roy's getting quicker. I think Luca's responding now. So there's going to be more pressure on Softy to perform. And I think, it's completely open, I think. I think it could go anyway, personally.
And Phil, what do you see as the challenge from Roy then? Do you see the pressure getting to Softy, or is he someone who's able to remain quite cool? I mean, he's won countless TGP1 titles by now, and a TGP Cars title as well. He wants to add a TGP Dirt title to his roster, but can he do it?
Oh, Softy's definitely motivated to add another title. He's good at handling the pressure, but this is rallying. It's a completely different type of pressure. You know, it's more internal and mental pressure. So he can absolutely handle it. But I think he's going to go into New Zealand as the favourite. Roy, though, I think could also be as quick as him again at New Zealand. Lucas, as you say, has the pace as well. He just needs to maybe somehow focus on making less mistakes. Easier said than done. But I think there is going to be a challenge for to Softy from Roy, definitely at New Zealand.
Yeah, perfect. So then we move on to Argentina thereafter, and Spain, and then we're finishing in the US. 4 very different rallies. We're using 3 different types of vehicle. We're using the R5s twice. We're using the R5s. Those are the modern rally cars for the season finale in US as well. So we'll give you a quick rundown of how the championship looks as of today, going into 4 rounds remaining. As I'm sure you can imagine, it is still fair game in some areas of the table. So Softy on maximum points with 60. Roy, with 2 seconds, sits 10 points behind him. Dom has quite a nice cushion in third, but then thereafter it does get very close. So the difference between Zach in 4th on 31 points and Phil in 10th is on 22. So we've got less than 10 points, covering 7 drivers from 4th to 10th. It's going to be fantastic, isn't it, the rest of the season?
Yeah. I was like, no, they're even further back, and they're obviously themselves up the table. I think Aiden as well, he's looking to respond. And then, of course, there's the Dirt 2 Championship, where I think Alex and so, lots to fight for still. The points, the way the points work as well. If Softy does have a mistake, if he does DNF the next rally, suddenly he could actually be back down in 4th or 5th in the championship. So,
changes very quickly.
In this rally.
Just change very quickly, and you draw on TGP Dirt 2 there. So we've got Chris Johnson top of the leaderboard with almost maximum points after a first and a second in TGP Dirt 2. Alex Afro, you rightly mentioned, in second there with a rally win in Australia. Then Jacko in third, and Dan in 4th. Those top 4 all separated by 13 points, with then a 9-point buffer between them and 5th. So we've got a fantastic series, which we've spoken about, which draws up so many variables and unexpected natures with each rally that comes forward. And we've got a great season left to look forward to, haven't we, boys?
Definitely. Looking forward to it. Can't wait.
Yeah, me too. Should be good. Bring it on.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me for a recap and a reminisce about TGP Dirt. I hope you all enjoyed it. There's more to come certainly over the next few weeks from this podcast. TGP has a podcast. And next week, we're going to be looking back at the explosive title battle, fantastic TGP2 season, and a interesting title decider that we had in season 21. So thank you very much, gents. Thank you for joining me. And we will see you all next week. Thank you very much for listening.